We are taught to map human civilization through political conquest. We track a timeline of rulers and battles, charting the specific moment each empire rose before sinking into the sand. This view of history is a chronicle of repetition, a tally of who killed whom and who held the throne. It is what some scholars call the history of crimes. But while those physical empires were built and destroyed, a parallel history was quietly being engineered beneath the noise of war. This is the history of consciousness. It is a lineage of cultural and spiritual evolution, driven not by kings, but by mystics and divine figures who focused on the inner life of the individual. These figures didn't rely on the sword. They reshaped human values through relatable storytelling, building a cultural foundation that outlived the political regimes that tried to govern them. Transmitting vast cosmic truths to an ordinary population presents a logistical problem. If a divine messenger is entirely alien or untouchable, the message cannot take root in the daily lives of people. The historical solution required these figures to take on human bodies. By deliberately experiencing physical limitations and human friendships, they created a necessary bridge for their teachings. Krishna provides a clear case study for this strategy. In the historical texts, he is the king of Dwarka, a figure of immense political and physical power. Yet his legacy is defined by his relationship with Sudama. Sudama was a wise Brahmin, but he lived in extreme poverty, arriving at the palace gates in rags. This reunion between the king and the beggar serves as a functional template. It was designed to shift the focus of society toward human relationship, making physical status secondary to personal devotion. Sudama traveled to the opulent palace of Dwarka, carrying the only gift he could afford, a small bundle of dry, flattened rice tied in a tattered cloth. Upon hearing of Sudama's arrival, Krishna ignored all military protocol. He ran to the gates, embraced his friend, and personally washed his feet. Krishna didn't just accept the gift, he ate the rice joyfully, placing the value of devotion far above material worth. This interaction demonstrated complete presence. He offered total warmth and a lack of judgment regarding Sudama's torn clothes or his worldly status. By treating a beggar with the reverence typically reserved for a deity, Krishna modeled a world where status is secondary to presence. This interaction planted a social seed that would later bypass the most rigid political hierarchies. But how did this message of radical devotion survive the centralized, oppressive regimes of later centuries? Later poet saints like Tulsidas and Mirabai utilized a specific tactic. They abandoned political rhetoric entirely. They relied strictly on poetry and songs to keep the stories of Krishna and Sudama alive. This diagram shows the mechanics of cultural bypass. Political speech is blocked by state censorship, but the fluid language of art flows around the barrier into the cultural subconscious. Jesus, Buddha, and Mansoor used this same storytelling mechanism to reject worldly power. This retreat from the political arena was a calculated strategy. It allowed these values to take root in the rhythm of daily life, staying below the threshold of a state-level military response while reshaping the community's internal identity. By refusing to engage in the history of crimes, these figures created a cultural foundation that outlived the empires that tried to govern them. The empires of ancient warlords have turned to dust, their names often surviving only as footnotes of conflict. But the artifacts of the history of consciousness remain active. In the city of Porbandar, India, we find the physical proof of this parallel timeline. This is the Sudama Mandir. It is a massive, highly revered temple that stands as a historical anomaly. It is a magnificent monument dedicated not to a king or a conqueror, but to a mortal, impoverished man who simply loved his friend. During the modern observance of Kuchala Dinam, millions of people still offer beaten rice to remember this specific interaction. It answers the central question of our dual history. While the empires of warlords eventually turn to dust, the power generated through human connection is what actually keeps a civilization alive.